So welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with our very special guest, of course, Michele and Roko, and our special guest, Anna Vagin. She's a PhD in private practice, and I'm going to read this because it's super important. She helps students and young adults with social cognitive differences. Anna, I met on LinkedIn. I was super intrigued about what you do, and it's interesting because there's so much about what you do and what we talked about and leadership. And so that's where this piece and this topic. So this topic is the power of others. And the quote we're going to kick it off with was one Anna shared that was one of her favorites. And it's through others we become ourselves. And so it's so short and it was very powerful. And when I think about that, it took me back to whether it's DISC communication styles and the things that inform who we are, mentors that we have. Roko and I have had the same mentor, but it's through that we start to form who we are and our identity and how that we end up relating to other people within that sphere that we're operating in. So it's just super freaking cool stuff. And so Anna, welcome. And what are your thoughts?
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. And you know, the quote is from Lev Vygotsky, who was such a brilliant cognitive psychologist. He gave us terms like scaffolding learning and mediated learning experience. And, you know, we had a great conversation, Michele, a while back, and I really have the best job on the planet because I get to spend time with wonderful families and amazing students and young adults. And I was thinking about this quote that I get to help people become themselves. Mm-hmm. How cool is that?
I love it.
And in the process of doing that, I change who I am and hopefully become a better person, a more thoughtful, empathic, supportive, you know, mentor and guide and partner with so many families and clinicians who I spend time talking with. You're absolutely right. It's just so cool to think about how do we affect others? How do others affect us? And how that is a journey for all of us. So thank you for having me here to talk about these cool ideas.
Oh, it's a fun topic. Thank you. Roko, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was, when Michele shared that we were going to have you on and the topic, I got really excited because throughout this podcast, and what episode are we on now, Michele?
I don't, we're in our 60s. We're in our 60s.
In almost every single episode, Michele and I talk about our mentor, Margie Hagany, and the influence that she had on our lives and how our lives have changed as a result of her mentorship. And so the quote, what you were just saying, it speaks music to my heart. And as a leader, I've learned that one of the greatest gifts is developing others, because I develop myself as I develop them. And it's that exchange of experience, interaction that changes both parties, and hopefully for the better if it's a good exchange, but you know, changes people's lives.
Anna, there was when you and I were talking before, there was one situation you were talking with a young adult that you were helping, and he had raised the issue that you were coaching him around social stuff to do. And he raised the issue is like, why do I have to change? Why is it I'm the one that has to change, right? Why isn't it someone else is not changing to meet my needs or how I show up? And it was super powerful for me, because the reality is we expect people, and we're so different anyway, right? So if we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not about saying, here are the rules to the game, and you need to come in to play with us. You've got to follow these rules, or you're not allowed to play. And so the powerful part for me was, as leaders, we have the opportunity, when you talk about diversity, equity, inclusion of all, to look and say, okay, what are your rules that I can meet and meet you where you're at, instead of you always having to make the concession. And it was just struck me.
Yes, I think it's a lot about what makes each of us comfortable in our skin and in our relationships. And we're all egocentric. You know, we all think, well, because I think this, everybody should think this, because this is comfortable for me, it should be comfortable for everyone. You know, in my field in the past, you know, probably 3 to 5 years, for example, there's a real change in eye contact. Eye contact used to be kind of demanded of many students with whom I work. You have to look, because the neurotypical world expects eye contact. Even though when we step back a little bit, we realize that eye contact is very variable. But now we can rethink that and think, well, wait a minute. If having eye contact makes someone more uncomfortable, less happy and feeling good about interacting with me, maybe I need to rethink that. And it's very similar. Often when I meet people, I didn't say this to you, Michelle, but I often say to people, hi, Michelle, it's so great to meet you. But you know what? I'm going to try really hard to remember your name, but I'm not really good at names, so I'm probably going to forget. I hope you forgive me for that. And I kind of, you know, I have that little tiny bit of self-advocacy there. I kind of expect that you're going to be nice to me and say, yeah, no problem. I'll remind you about my name for the next 6 years. So I finally get it. But that is no different from somebody for whom eye contact is not comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, are you going to demand that I remember all name? Well, then I can't do that. That's not going to work for me. And so thinking about things in slightly different ways and looking through different lenses, being a little bit more empathic, being able to take perspective a little bit better than perhaps we all have been doing is so important because of the value that brings in, again, helping someone become themselves and carrying me down that river of becoming myself. So it's a wonderful era, I think, that we're in, where we're being challenged with a lot of these ideas that are new to some people. And part of it, you know, being challenged doesn't always feel good. Where we're like, oh, really? I haven't been doing something that makes you comfortable. You know, but that doesn't mean it isn't worth going down that road. And that's often what helps me evolve. It also helps the students with whom I work evolve. They trust that I'm going to challenge them at the right level, that I'm not going to challenge them to do something that really is out of their reach, maybe right now, maybe for more than right now. But that trust of, I think I know what I'm doing and I'm going to push you a little bit. You know, people who love me push me all the time. And you know, sometimes I push back and sometimes I can step back and think, well, hold on, Anna, reel it back, dial it down a little. Maybe there is value. There probably is value in this criticism even that people are giving me. It's important for me to listen.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're all on this road together.
I love the part that you said about the challenge. You know, for me, I do a lot of process improvement. And one of the things that we talk about as leaders, when you're developing others in their problem solving capabilities, is to challenge them. And there is an example of you know, people hiking and the rope that's between the leader and the people who are below the leader. You keep the rope tight, but not too tight. If you keep it, you know, too tight, you might pull the people over and they lose their footing. But if you keep it too loose and don't challenge them, then they may not make it up. They'll still be wobbly. So you got to keep it just the right amount of tension to where you're pushing them beyond what they have today and what they know today, but not at a pace that they can't stay grounded and move forward.
Yeah, it's that example is funny. It's a visual from Toyota management from like 50 plus years ago. It's probably closer to 60 now. But it was a visual depicting leadership and how leadership is in the Toyota production system at Toyota. And so it's so basic, but there's so much in there to what she just said. And so it's the same thing if you're coaching or developing people, or you know, the role that you have in helping people, you know, improve and get to where this is less impactful for them to be, you know, fully functioning in the world, to where it's not that noticeable. Or they're successful. I think that's the main thing, right? Fully functioning and living their best life, whatever that may look like. So it was interesting for me when you were talking. I'm going to read the other quote because that's what came to mind for me when we were just talking, just about us learning from other people and them learning from us. There is power in understanding the journey of others to help create your own. And so I think, and that's from Kobe Bryant. I think that quote too is about, there's an appreciation that I have for the challenges that somebody else has to be able to have whatever level of success they may have or realize. And I have an appreciation for certain things that I may struggle with more, or certain things that aren't that challenging for me. But I think it helps me put stuff in perspective, and me and my challenges in perspective, to where I'm going to go, you know what, I'm going to be more open to this, or I'm not going to be as hard on this thing, because look what they're able to accomplish, right? And come back over whatever they're coming back from. And I think there's just a lot of learning in that. And like I said, it was super powerful when you're talking about that one thing, and it shifted me to go, what adjustments can I make to create a better experience for somebody else? Because it's not all about following my rules.
Yeah, that's really true. And, you know, as you were talking just now, Michelle, I'm remembering that when we had our first conversation, we talked a lot about mental state verbs and mental process, and how young children learn about mental process through other people, by hearing the language of other people, the words that other people are using. You know, Vygotsky, in his whole theory of internal language, really took the position of, you don't have internal language until you have external language with other people. Intra-language develops from inter-language. That communication with people is really what kind of builds us internally, and the importance of that, and circling back to how important words are. Building ourselves kind of from the ground up. And it's so magical how that happens. How young children hear words that are very abstract, like hope or miss, how they hear those words being used, and they figure out what that means, and then apply it to their own lives. Because in so many ways, that is the genesis of resilience. Resilience based in such large part in, I can talk myself through difficult situations. I have positive self-talk or mantras, or I can tell myself, you know, buck up at it, it's not so bad. So however you want to describe that internal language can get me through a lot.
Right.
And so the converse question is, what if you don't have that internal language? You're not going to get through these challenging situations as well. You're not going to be as resilient. And so the journey of developing language and interacting with the world isn't just about words. It's about, how are we going to make it through whatever our life journey is? Because part of being human includes the fact that hard things will happen to us. And I work with fabulous families. No parent can protect their child from having hard things happen. Parents get sick, kids have seizures, grandparents die. That's part of life. And to step back and consider, how can I help people become themselves, so that so when those days come, they're as best prepared as I can support them in being. and they're as ready as the world can help them be. Because, you know, it was a famous book. Bad things happen to good people. And bad things happen to even mediocre people. Bad things happen to everybody. And it's part of all of our journeys.
I never really thought about what you just said with the internal language and for since COVID, a little bit before COVID because of the burnout that started before COVID and then it got accelerated with COVID in healthcare. There's been so much talk about resilience and it's almost taken on like this overused term and but the way you explained it and talked about this internal language, it gave me such insight that, oh my gosh, some of the things that we've been doing around resilience isn't necessarily going to get us to where, because we're focusing on the wrong thing. You know, maybe we need to be asking questions about what if staff are feeling burnt out, what is their internal language? How will they, rebound? How do they talk themselves through difficult situations, as opposed to saying, oh, we have this program, go walk 5 minutes, go do that, kind of thing. So thank you for that. I appreciate that perspective. I had not considered that before.
It's interesting when
I do have a lot of internal language myself. I never knew what that was called. I talked
It's funny when there was a couple things that came to mind. Well, a number of things that came to mind, but a couple with the internal language piece of it is that when you talked about resilience, because I hadn't made that connection before, but I should have made the connection because it's like, I love Sean Akers' work on Happiness Advantage, right? It's about that mindset. It's about starting from that place of happy. And that has to do with how are you filtering things? Your internal dialogue is a big part of that, right? Are you scanning the world for all the negative and the terrible things that are happening? Or are you scanning the world for the positive so that you're not thinking that there's this really wonky relationship of bad to good, like the news will tell us? That's the thing that connected for me. And I hadn't had it said quite that way that you did. The other thing that came to mind for me is the stuff that you're talking about that is around children and how they're learning in their internal language is how adults learn as well around who they surround themselves with. So if you have a mentor or somebody that's helping develop you, or you're a leader yourself, this is the kind of influence that we can have on people on our teams. Because I don't think it stops at childhood. No, just like, wow. I mean, it's like, okay, so it starts there. And I look at my 2 youngest grandkids who are now 3 and 6, and I've watched that same thing happen to where the 3-year-old is saying stuff in a way that an adult would say it, right? Because that's what they've been exposed to. And it's like, you're 3. But it's unlocking stuff or making connections that in my mind probably should have been there before but weren't.
Well, and I think we often jump to the solution and we jump to the fix without perhaps spending enough time talking about the discomfort and the emotion that underlies the reaction that we get from someone, or how we feel about a challenge or whatever. That, often it's based in that trifecta of uncomfortable feelings of sad, mad, and worried. And sometimes it's helpful to sit in the discomfort a little bit to allow us to, first of all, see that it's not the scariest thing on the planet. And that we don't have to run from it. We don't have to run from the discomfort. Maybe we can sit, and again, with people we feel safe with our mentors, with our family, that we can sit and talk about the discomfort instead of saying, I don't want to talk about it, let's just fix it and move on. Because in that discussing and thinking about the discomfort, we're going to grow as people also. We're going to really get further. And I think I told you this example also, Michelle, in our first conversation of working with kids on Zoom during COVID. Kids were upset. Kids were struggling. And we had this one session where I kind of set it out and supported the kids in talking about what they missed. Miss being a mental process. And one student was just so teary, fourth grader, pretty much his whole, lifetime that he remembered. His family went to Gottsburgers on Tuesday nights. And his friends would meet up with him, and it was kind of a community thing. And then COVID hits, and next thing you know, there is no more going to Gotts on Tuesdays. And this was such a loss for him. It was such a ritual. He loved it. He had kind of a limited, he loved burgers, let's just say that.
Yeah.
To be able to talk about how he missed it, but then do the other side of that coin and talk about hope of, I hope we can go back to Gotts soon. Just making that statement, I hope, anchors his future. It gives him a goal. And that helps bind anxiety and sadness. Because, okay, I have this sadness. It's Tuesday. I'm not going to Gotts, but I'm hoping we'll go back soon. I bet we will. I know we will at some point. That those mental anchors really support us in whatever size struggle we're dealing with. And it may support us when, the heel on my shoe breaks. It may support me in a much more intense and life-changing situation that might come my way. Having these anchors that are mental, but they just filter into our lives in such incredible ways. And we have that power to help others and hold them up the way that they're going to hold us up when we need it.
Yeah. I'm so glad you shared that story, because I was going to ask the question, could you elaborate on what it means to sit with the difficulty, what it would sound like and look like? So thank you for that. And I that last piece, when you were talking about the anchors, as you were saying it, that shift from hope, meaning, it's out there, it's an aspiration, but then shifting it also from hope to visualizing it that, yeah, it's actually going to happen sometime, and then maybe actually having it happen. So I liked that progression that you were talking about.
My brain went to, it's the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
That hope. Yeah. That hope, when you have that shift, I'm like, it's the light at the end of the tunnel. So it's like you're saying all this stuff, and I'm like, okay, that has more meaning now. I mean, it's like,
And the power of that group with that student, with the Gotts example, was that there were 3 other kids online. And so they heard his truth, and then they were able to talk about what they missed. And so there we have a group of 4th grade boys who aren't always into talking about feelings.
Yeah.
Being able to see reflected in each other. Oh, wow. I'm not the only person. I'm not the only one who has this COVID sadness.
Yeah.
Other people have it, and they can, and wow, you know what I really miss? I really miss going to the 49ers game, or whatever it was. They each could relate in their own way. And it's such a great example of, through each other, they became more of themselves.
I love that. I see it happening in, there's online stuff that we do. And so people coming together virtually on online to where they can connect in people in rooms. And one of the common themes that comes out of the value of it is, I'm not alone. Other people feel this way too, as they're going through change, and we're helping them manage and all that stuff. And to your point, that's so freaking powerful, because otherwise you may sit in it and go, am I the only one that feels this way? Am I just such a loser that I can't handle it like everyone else can, kind of thing? Not that those are the words verbatim, but I mean, that resonated too, that you're talking even in leadership. Give people that space to share and connect and compare, and not that you're gonna, dog things or anything else, but like, to your point, sit in it for a while, to where, hey, this has been less than ideal. And I'm not alone. And is there somebody who's moved beyond it a little bit further down the road to where that can give me hope? Because I'm here at the beginning of it, someone else is further down and they're doing okay.
And it doesn't have to be something extreme. Also,
No.
there was an article in Wired magazine years ago about annoyment, feeling annoyed. Because we all have all these things that we feel annoyed about. And the interesting part that the article pointed out was how talking about these little annoyances, whether it's like, you know, the mud and the rain and all of that, or politics or traffic or gluten intolerance, whatever, that actually brings us closer together. When people come together, and what you know, small talk, well, let's complain about the weather and the traffic and this and this, and when we do that process, we all feel better.
Well, we're connecting.
Exactly.
We're connecting.
And realizing that, yeah, we all feel annoyed about traffic. Okay, so now we feel better. Now it brings us together.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. So I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I love the connections between what you do and the kid aspect of it, and the realization of I'm connecting, going, wait a minute, that's still as an adult, we're still dealing with all this stuff in leadership. So thank you. It's been awesome. I could literally sit here forever, and then it no longer is a soundbite. It's
a whole meal.
Really long thing. Yeah. But thank you. So Anna, one of the things we do is ask you is, what 1 to 2 things would you want people to walk away with from this topic of the power of others?
I guess one thing would be for people, as I think you have, Michelle, in the time, you know, since we first met, is to just every now and then just think, wow, what is it like if you think of something like changing your mind? Wow, that's when you start really thinking about, well, I have a mind. Wait a minute, I can change my mind. It's such a monumental ability. And so the more I think that people can every now and then just think, wow, hoping and missing, that's very cool that we can do that. And kind of, what role does that play in my life? And what role does that play in the lives of those around me? I just think in particular, that language of mental process is so powerful. And we are so lucky we have it. Because it makes us who we are. Yeah. No, I agree. Very insightful. Yeah, thank you. Roko, how about you?
Well, you've given me the power of others just by being with you today, Anna. So thank you so much. For me, I think there was 2 parts that were just really just mind-blowing for me and gave me a new perspective that I will carry forward, is that internal language piece. And also the sitting with the difficulty and then shifting to the hope side of it, and how to transition it. It was, you know, we did a podcast with the social side of change, the people side of change. And that, as we were talking about that piece of it, that's what was coming to my mind, is this can really be applied as we're talking about the people side of change. So thank you for the perspectives.
I appreciate all of it. I think the stuff that stands out for me is almost like this last comment that you made, Anna, around the words and the changing in the mind and all that stuff. And what it took me to is being able to see life through the eyes of someone else and not take for granted the little things. And the example I'll give is like my grandkids, right? You could literally give them the box with a wooden spoon and they're thoroughly enthralled with, you know, playing and doing all this stuff. And I think it's that reminder of, let's stop and pause and look and appreciate what is around us and what we have. And to your point, the ability to actually wrap our brains around these words that have meaning, that can impact our feelings and how we show up and move forward. And I think it's that reminder of grounding back to get rid of the noise and start having an appreciation for those things that we may have taken for granted. So nothing heavy. Just
no, it's noticing magic.
no, nothing heavy. Thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
I have to.
I'm so
I have so enjoyed this conversation.
it's just been awesome. So this has been Leadership Soundbites with Roko, Michelle, and Anna. Please like, share, subscribe, and until next time, thank you.